Thanks for joining us for part 3. Stella's latest novel is Finding Callidora, released in the fall of 2019. Stella, in the discussions of your first 2 novels, it would appear that you do a lot of research. So how does the research ground what it is you want to explore in your projects? And what comes first, research or the idea for a book?
Well, that's a really good question. I think for me, the idea of the book comes first. And then I sort of experiment with, where the character is, what they're doing, who they are. And then I typically have research questions on the side. So I have a separate notebook or a separate file of questions. Well, what about this? Or what about that? And how does that work? And so for me, the story comes first and the research basically either along the way or second.
Great. Could you tell me a little bit about your journey to finding Callidora?
I will. I'm just going to bring up my screen again. And so Finding Callidora is much more autobiographical, than my other novels. The others were not autobiographical at all. This one is much more so. It's a family saga that begins in present time and then goes back 100 years to prior to, or at the end, of World War I, and then forward to the end, which comes back to the present time. So I'll just put on the trailer for Finding Callidora, which is quite short.
Bloodshed for love of country, for pride, for duty, that duty paid by blood money. A piece of land, a home, a place to forget war and past glories, a place to finally belong. Yet that land and prosperity festers with jealousy, and later a betrayal felt through each of the 4 generations of the Alevixopolis family. Each will turn away from home, but the yearning for a place to belong won't let them be. Finding Callidora is the search for home against the multiple backdrops of the unforgiving terrain of the Anatolia, the isolated Greek islands of Naxos and Crete, the bustling, chaotic streets of Cairo, and later the vast expanse of Canada. Finding home just may help to find Callidora.
So, in terms of a summary of the novel, it is really a story of a betrayal. And just as I said, at the end of World War I, and how that transpires in this particular family throughout its generations. It begins in present day, then returns to 1918, and then goes forward from there. It is broken down into 4 sections. And just like in my other books, there are various protagonists, various voices in this head, each linked to each other by blood. So it is all family back to the original patriarch and matriarch that we first meet in the book. And the uniqueness, I think, as well about Finding Callidora is chapter headings. The chapter headings I use are actual newspaper headlines. So they're real headlines from over the 100 years that this novel deals with. And I think what the headlines do, because there are 4 sections to the book and it covers such a long period of time, it grounds the reader into where they are at any given time in terms of time frame, but it also shows the reader what is going on not only with the characters in that time frame, but what's going on globally in their world and how it impacts them. So it just situates, I think, the reader as well as the story as it unfolds, if that makes sense. then you're going to, wonder what my why was. Well, as we talked in the first part about this need to belong and understand my background and where I fit. Again, I'm an immigrant to Canada. We came at a very young age, and I think I've missed my culture my whole life. And I've always searched for it. I've gone into, searching for my roots and my grandparents, my great-grandparents, etc. And so that's part of it, is trying to understand where I belong. But really, it was a conversation with my aunt. I think I had discovered some things about a piece of property that I heard about when I was a kid, that was in the family, that was, my great-grandfather's and great-grandmother's property. And so I was telling her about this and telling her about people that I met and how they remembered my grandmother and how they remembered my great-grandmother and all of this kind of stuff. And they were telling me stories. And my aunt basically said, oh, I was there when I was very young. And, I didn't like that place, because I met this man and he asked me a question, are you with us or are you against us? And she said, I don't know what you're talking about. And then so he sort of, walked away from her. But she had this idea that there must have been a family vendetta. And when she said the word vendetta, for me, it was like, a vendetta? What could possibly have happened that would have created this situation? So that really sent me, off and trying to figure it out. I think it's probably too many people have since passed to sort of get to the root of what that vendetta might have been. So part of it is also, part of it is fiction. So I came up with an idea and where it might have, started. And but mostly I think it had to do with trying to make sense of my own history and where I belong. And again, as before with the other books, there was lots of research. It included visiting the museum of the War Museum in Athens and the Museum of the Culture of Greeks of Asia Minor. I spent an incredible amount of time at this particular library in Athens, where there's several books. It's a historical library. And in fact, Lord Byron's pen and his journal and that sort of thing are kept under glass in this particular library. And so it was an incredible experience to read about these various time frames and what writers in these various time frames had written about for Greece and for Turkey, because they're involved there. I spent some time in talking to a librarian as well at the Cultural Center. I also talked to different people who have done quite a lot of research in this particular area, about Greeks who have left home, about Greeks who have gone to Egypt, about Greeks who were in Turkey, all of that sort of stuff. And then did a lot of research in terms of old newspapers and contacting this person that's on, Stephen at the Canadian Museum of Immigration at Pier 21, who was just so lovely. Everybody was really lovely in terms that they sort of took on my project and, well, how can we help you and how can we find this and that? And so that made quite a difference for me in terms of finding the things that I needed to find. So I'm just going to talk a little bit, actually read from the prologue, which happens in present day and introduces a particular, the land that I was talking about earlier. She gazes out the car window at the olive trees in the fields beside the narrow road. They stand unmoving in the wind, although the sea beyond is ruffled with whitecaps. The sea and the sky, here or a blue she has never seen anywhere else in her travels. This is home. She has felt it in the surge in her chest every time she's come to this country looking for her past, a place where she might belong. It's useless, Pedimu, her father had told her. We'll never find what you're looking for. Too much time has passed. But she knows this is home even without any concrete proof. The stranger they'd met only a few hours ago says something to her father and points. The two men are sitting in the front seat of the car, and she leans forward from the back, trying to make out what the man is saying. Yi, land. She understands the word and follows his finger. This land is closer to the sea. There are more olive trees here, and in their pale green midst is a house of stone. The roof has collapsed and the stone is muddied, but the structure stands. There is no front door or glass in any of the window frames. Tattered sheets of plastic flap against the sides of the house. It must have been a family home at one time. She sees the oleander bushes dotted in flowers of her favorite color, fuchsia, and is sure the scent reaches her even at this distance. Someone must have cared about this place once. Once upon a time, she thinks. This is how all her fantasies begin. She has a tendency to romanticize spaces, build stories of hardship and triumph for the characters she makes up. What if? She dreams of reconstructing the shacks she has seen all over this country, restoring them so they can be loved again. She dreams one of these shacks is hers to love. I don't know why, the man says, but that piece of land has always had a name. A woman's name. I've never changed it. He takes his eyes off the road and turns to look at her father. It was the right thing to do. When the man says the name, she reels back in her seat. Tears pool, and she swallows hard, trying to keep them at bay. Still they come. After all the dead ends, the bureaucracy, and her family's warnings, she has found it.
Beautiful, Stella. And I really love hearing about all of the origins of your stories. They're so fascinating. I can see how they really connect to something you saw or experienced or a person. So that's it's great to hear about those initial sparks that got you going.
I think most people worry about that I likely see them on the street and start writing about them or something.
But you do sometimes. So this novel has quite a few shifts in time, leaping from present to past and then kind of moving up through time. Why did you choose this structure?
You know, I think it was trying to, I really like the idea of the prologue, of sort of setting up the stage, because that is, you know, me, that was me at the time, trying to find the home, the place, just some connection to the land and to my ancestors. And so it really was the beginning of, and I wanted to start it that way. For some reason, it was something I wanted to experiment with. And then in terms of the rest of it, in terms of the time, it goes forward in time. So it just goes from one period of time to the next period of time, without a lot. There are some remnants back and forth in some of the sections as backstory, so that you can connect what is happening. But for the most part, it follows linearly. And so I think it works fine that way. But I think because the beginnings were my own search, I wanted the reader to feel that, and then to go back in time and see the story unfold for previous generations until it catches up with itself in the present day.
Great. Now, I understand this story is your most autobiographical in nature. Did you have any concerns about how close it was to your own life and your family's?
I think for the most part, I'm an open book. It's There's not much hidden behind here. So I wasn't really concerned about myself, but I was about my family. And I did talk to, in particular, my cousins, who, are captured, or parts of their lives are captured in these stories, in this book. And so, and they all gave me the thumbs up and said, go for it, and that sort of thing. I mean, there's a lot of masking as well. And as I said earlier, some of it, a lot of it is fiction. I get asked that, by the way. I've been to some book clubs that say, well, is this you? Where are you in this? And but there's a lot of fiction in this too, because, as I said earlier, people are gone and the history has gone with it. And it's only by a few links and a few, things that have happened just by sheer accident that I was able to find that particular land that I'd heard about my entire life, but had never seen it, didn't know anything about it, except that it existed. And I remember going to an office, a land titles office in Que Parecía, and asking the person there, this is the village where my grandfather was, my great grandfather was born. My family has this land. Would you know where it is? And the woman looked at me and said, oh my God, just like in Canada, you need to have the coordinates, you need to have an address. And so walked out of that office, not exactly, having been put in my place, let's just say.
Incredible, though, you managed to find it.
Well, it just, as I said, it was an accident. Walking down the road after being in that office, and a truck went by and it stopped, and it happened to have my last name on it, my maiden name, Leventoyannis, and he happened to stop and caught up with him. And he was a trucker taking watermelon to another town. And I said, my father was with me at the time. And so he spoke to him, the man, and my daughter wants to find this land and this property. And I wonder if we're related because we've got the same name. And he looked at us and he went, here's my phone number. I'm going, to Kalamata. He was going to deliver the watermelon. And he said, but I'll be back tonight, and you call me and I'll ask my father. And my father said, don't bother the man, leave him alone. And I said, okay. And then did the complete opposite, and phoned him. And with my bad Greek and his better English, we figured it out, figured something out. And then his father came to our hotel the next day, and then he told us to come to to his property, and he was incredibly hospitable, and he made food for us and whatever. And then he phoned somebody in Athens, and he phoned somewhere else, and blah blah blah. And it turns out that man was my father's third cousin.
Thank you so much, Stella, for telling us all about your fiction, your books up to this point. For our audience, join us in part 4 when we discuss and hear about what Stella's working on right now. For more information or to connect with Stella about her books for school programs, book clubs, or writers interested in talking about the writing process, go to Stella's website at stellaharvey.com or connect with her on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube.